Okay. To whom it may concern. I am currently working on a novel based on a personal experience I had overseas, concerning the murder of an American teacher at the school at which I worked. Far East, a year and 8 months ago. I arrived on a 3-month contract a month after the murder. I was under the impression that the case had been resolved when I accepted the job, but within hours of my arrival, I realized that it remained a mystery. I was reluctant at first to admit the possibility of one of the staff being the murderer, but over the course of the first month, it became impossible to deny. The question was, who, in that insular little world of Western foreigners, had committed what I had learned was the stabbing and mutilation of their colleague? Or was the killer among those who left the country shortly after the murder? Did I really have any reason to be paranoid? I didn't know whether to suspect my own roommate or to pity her. She and her previous apartment mate, who'd left for the States, had discovered the body of their murdered co-worker. Were her strange remarks, her insomnia, due to that trauma, or to something else? One might think these questions, if not 100 others that may have been irrelevant, would have been answered the night I came home to find the apartment filled with police and an American CID agent snapping gum in the hallway, and my apartment mate wandering trance-like through the rooms. But this was to be only the prelude to more questions, which apparently remained forever unanswered. On that night, I learned that my apartment mate had failed a lie detector test, and that under interrogation had made an implausible and untenable confession and an accusation. She claimed that her former apartment mate had come home in bloody clothes the night of the murder, said she'd murdered their friend, and asked my apartment mate to return to the scene of the crime with her and make it look like a robbery. So she did. Apart from the fact that the story as she told it didn't square with the evidence, the CID agent told me that they suspected her of, at least, having cut the woman's throat after she was already dead. At any rate, it seemed that she was under house arrest. The place was full of cops. I stayed that night and slept soundly for the first time since I'd got there. In fact, I stayed there for several more days, searching the apartment during the day when my apartment mate was away with the police for further questioning. It appeared that the police, who from the start had not shown much interest in this sordid murder of a foreigner, were disinclined to make a thorough search, and the Americans didn't have the authority. I found some things and didn't find others, but nothing turned up in the way of concrete evidence. The strangest thing in the apartment at that time was a sort of altar that my apartment mate had erected on her desk in her room, consisting of a photo portrait of the dead woman, flanked by red candles and incense. I spent several days searching and nights sitting around trying to make small talk with the non-English speaking guards, watching them drink the local liquor and fall asleep in chairs or on the floor, chatting with my apartment mate, who had lapsed into blissful, even cheerful ignorance of the seriousness of her situation. At times, I tried to get her to talk about what had happened that night, but she suffered huge gaps in her memory, or claimed to. Finally, I gave in to the urging of my friends there to give it up, and I moved into a hotel. About a week later, I got a phone call from my apartment mate. The police had left. We had the place to ourselves again. Did I want to return? She was, in fact, free, but not to leave the country. Over the course of my remaining time there, she would occasionally drift into the faculty rooms and chatter with whoever was there, or indulge in odd behavior like drawing random straight lines on paper. None of us turned our backs on her, literally or figuratively. Perhaps it isn't surprising how pleasant one is towards a suspected murderess on the loose. I suppose this is why she was permitted to come and go as she pleased. She was already disgruntled about losing her job. Why push it? The woman in the States was also off the hook. There was no extradition treaty. And despite the fact that the story as told by my apartment mate was impossible, the woman in the States was nonetheless a viable suspect, and it did seem likely that the two were mutually involved in the killing. My apartment mate claimed that the woman in the States was a lesbian and had stabbed their friend over a dozen times in a frenzied passion after the friend had rejected her advances. From what I was able to learn from those who had known her, she actually was gay and had a history of mental problems, having once been interned in an asylum in lieu of prison after a stabbing attempt while in the States prior to coming to the school in Northeast Asia. Some of my new friends had liked the woman, others had hated her. No one seemed to have any sympathy or liking for my apartment mate. She and my or her apartment mate had formed a fast friendship with the murdered woman, who had only been there 2 months before her death. Certainly, I believed that my apartment mate was involved, if not the sole perpetrator. The story followed me back to the States, where I was visited by FBI agents, and where, through correspondence, I learned more about the investigation and about the woman in the States, who was denying everything. One of the last things I learned was that my apartment mate had served a few months in prison on conspiracy charges and was then allowed to return to the U.S. She and the woman she accused are now living in neighboring states. This letter cannot convey the mix of tremendous emotions provoked by the weird situation, betrayal and fear foremost, heightened by cultural isolation, nor can it describe the hallucinogenic Alice in Wonderland twists, nor ask all the myriad questions that linger, nor express the bizarre reactions of people under abnormal stress. A novel can. The true story is an ideal mystery, a foreign land, a closed set of eccentric characters, psychological upheaval, false, if intriguing leads, intense relationships formed and deformed under pressure, and the black humor necessary to survival. If you are interested, please contact me at Box 300, Hurley, New York, 12443, or call 339-0021. Only if you're a publisher, though. This is a true story. Of course, there's a lot more to it.